Welcome everyone to the June meeting of Farmland Preservation, the Lower Makefield Farmland Preservation. I'm Michael Blank, I'm the board president, and with me, I'll let the other board members introduce themselves, starting with George.
George Hines, secretary.
Dennis Stedman, vice chairman.
Dan Bankowski, treasurer.
John Carney, member.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so we'll jump right into the agenda. The first item is approval of the May 24th meeting minutes. Dennis? Oh, sorry.
Yep.
That should be George.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I figured you were copying and pasting away.
I was.
So I sent out the meeting minutes. Janelle finalized them, and then Dennis sent me a quick blurb. I guess it was this morning, wanting to amend the meeting minutes. I think it was a correction regarding the difference between dealing with Mr. Hucklebridge and Majewski regarding the 295 fence issue.
Yes.
So I figure we'll have Janelle just amend the meeting minutes, and we can just put it in this meeting minutes and just reissue them. So with that minor thing, do I have a motion for approval of the May meeting minutes?
So moved.
Seconded?
I'll second it. I'll
Okay,
second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
So moved, approved.
So when George, when you get those finalized from Janelle, then I'll tuck them into our online folder.
Okay,
Okay. Turn it over to Dan for the treasurer's report.
Yeah, a couple quick items. So we sent out a couple checks since our last meeting. We sent $50 to LMT. This is for Charland Farms for their fee for the community day. And just a reminder, we offered it to all of the farmers, at least from us, if they wanted to participate in the community day, that we'd pay for their fee. And Charland was the only farm that took us up on that offer. I'm pretty sure we covered it in a prior meeting, but just to be sure, we sent a reimbursement to Dr. Sternad for $464.17. And this was a reimbursement to him for the expansion of the beehives. So he had bought a couple additional swarms. I don't know what the right term is there, but
hives.
Additional hive. Well, I think it was more than just the actual hive itself, but like physical
Bees.
It was
bees. Yeah.
a queen and 2 or 3 pounds of bees per hive. So it's 2 queens and 5 or 6 pounds of bees.
That's how you buy it, in pounds?
Yeah, you buy it by the pound.
Interesting.
Go figure.
And
They get shipped in a regular FedEx box, by the way.
Whoa.
Amazing.
And lastly, a reimbursement to Sean Carney for $149.16. This is for a handful of no dumping and no trespassing signs and the poles and hardware to install those signs.
Very good.
And that was it. And Sean, if you didn't get that check yet, I put it in the mail rather than drive it over. So you should have it shortly if you didn't get it yet.
No problem. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Any comments, questions for Dan? Okay, hearing none, we'll turn it over to Sean now for the latest update on buffer cleanups.
All right. I put a message in Teams the other day. I do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, so that we have a kind of a timeline of events as they happen. But second round of buffer cutting began on Wednesday of last week. I noticed it as I was kind of driving around, and then it actually took place back behind my house. to say the least, they've come a long way. I can remember Matt one time saying to me, it won't be long before we're back there cutting these buffers with lawnmowers. And I kind of chuckled and thought, well, that's a pretty grandiose plan, but we'll see where we get. And lo and behold, the other day, 3 mowers came side by side by side, like they were cutting the fairway of a golf course with a gentleman behind them who must have lost a bet because he was carrying a weed whacker. So it was something. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they cut it to the length of a lawn.
Yep.
Amazing. If they came across a property where somebody was throwing sticks and stuff over, they got off the mower and threw the sticks back over. They wrote down any properties, pinned them, if you will, on the app that we have of anywhere where we kind of need to address some things. It was nothing overly egregious, but really nice job, mowed down very tight, weed whacked, neighbors very happy, period. I'm speaking mainly of Leadham's because that's what I'm most familiar with, but I did drive around. I even received phone calls from people on the board of the way it looks. I mean, just driving down Dolington, they look amazing the way that they're trimmed. We still have work to do in spots. My thought is that similar to how we do a spring tour with the farmers, I think I'm going to set up like a late fall, early winter tour with Matt Corcoran and his son Lance. And if anybody wants to attend, I'll gladly put the date out there. But I know people don't always need things added to their calendar, and I'm happy to bear the brunt of this one. But my goal would be to go walk the buffers with Matt and his son and have them help us prioritize areas, such as the area we have on Stackhouse that needs to be addressed. Some areas over on Farmview 1 that need to be addressed. They bring these areas up from time to time and I jot them down in a notebook, but maybe they can help us set a priority list for the winter hours, kind of like how we sit down and prioritize our farms. I figured it could go a long way. So I'll reach out to Matt later in the year when he's a lot less busy, figure out a day and time where we can go walk these or even drive them. They're kind of, as long as the ground is solid, they're pretty easy to just go out and drive, but he can show us some areas. His mower did break late in doing the buffers. So the only buffer not done is Stackhouse. His machine threw a code that unfortunately a technician has to come out and fix. So I reached out to him today, still waiting for it to be fixed. It'll be fixed very shortly and they'll be out to do Stackhouse. When they do Stackhouse, they'll also be addressing the one issue we had behind, 1 or 2 of the homes. They're down close to Woodside that need some work. George and I worked on them for a little bit of time. He'll be using half of a summer day to fix that problem and then do the work on Stackhouse. And then it'll be complete. That will be the second of 4 total mowings of the buffer areas.
Very good.
Sounds great. Yeah. I did want to mention that when we say updates on buffer cleanups, we're talking about the farms that are leased by the stewards.
Yes.
So we're kind of excluding 2 that we've never had issues. Well, I want to say never, but we rarely have issues with Heather Ridge and Bridal Estates by
Yes.
Tom. Yeah, Tom and
Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah. We do still have some work to do over on Heather Ridge. The project that we started, we made great headway on. The neighbors are very happy, but we're not done. There's still some preventative work that if we do proactively will cost us a lot less than if we end up having to do it reactively because some stuff comes down. So I know Matt still needs to go over there at the end of the year to retrieve a couple of trees that were laid over there. When he does that, it'll probably be worth our time to spend a few of our winter hours cleaning that same area up. So not to say we don't have anything going on over there, but yes, the main issues we're talking about are the buffer areas on the farms that the stewards lease, and it's getting those back intact. I think the next time Matt goes around, he'll be doing some limbing work, keeping the trees limbed up where they need to, things like that. But the first time was a rough cut, getting things back in order. This was a finer cut. The next one will be even a finer cut with some limbing work. And then the final one of the season will be, kind of when they bring the chipper around and get rid of any and everything that is accumulated.
Yeah, he did a nice job off of Dolington Road over there. over by Susan Lane or whatever that is.
Susan Circle. Yeah,
Susan
Mike and I
Circle.
went over.
Yes.
He did a tremendous
nice
job
job.
on that, getting ready for the survey. That was a
Good.
lot of work, but it looks very good. I agree. Thanks, George.
And tying into this, it just came to mind is I don't know, Dan, if you want to address them
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I was
Farmview
going to bring it
1.
up and see if you wanted it here or under other business, but
Yeah.
so we had over on this is off of Fairfield Road, 1620 Fairfield Road, and guys, I can never remember which one is Farmview 1 or which one is Farmview 2. The lower
it's
side,
It's one.
Farmview 1.
Yeah.
This is off of Farmview 1, and again behind Fairfield Road, 1620 Fairfield Road. So the homeowners there, somebody at their request, they had go over and limb up the trees without our approval. So we let them know first and foremost that you had done this without our approval. And then second is, quite a mess of branches that are laying around. So while they cleaned up a good piece of it, there's still, quite a lot that are in the way. Some of it is in the way. Some of it's kind of back up a little bit off the buffer, if you will, that I think it could be mowed, or in theory, it could be mowed without those being moved. But there's still a lot that's in the way of even trying to mow there. So, Sean, I'm curious if Corcoran was able to make it back up in through there or not. But I reached out to her. Mike and I spoke with the homeowner there. Had a good conversation. I reached out, in a written request and an email asking for those remaining limbs to be moved. I haven't heard back from her yet. I can follow up with her again, but I'm curious if, Sean, you heard anything from your side.
I haven't. Matt did mention to me he wouldn't be able to get through there with the way things were now because of the way that buffer area narrows down and widens out in places because of the way the crop comes in and goes out on that top fence line. But he said that he would not be able to really do anything until that was removed. I let him know that we had requested, I believe what your email had said or text message said was 2 to 3 weeks from the time you talked to them.
Yeah.
So I did inform him of that timeline, but so I will be talking to him shortly, so I can kind of get an update on that as well.
Okay. And it's been 1 week since I notified her to do it. So.
Okay. I can tell you visibly from the street, it does not look like things have been removed, but I'm happy to make a walk back
Well,
there.
as we were talking to her, Dan, you want to add about, she said they were moved, and we wondered what that meant. So Dan and I went back there to see, and she had taken smaller branches that had been seemingly cut up and pushed up against our fence, which we agreed to. Looked okay, and we'll stop further growth there. So that's what she meant by move, but there's still a large pile or piles of debris.
There's multiple piles that remain, and they are right in the path of where a mower would need to go. And you're right; it's right up to the corn, so you can't get around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a good note that you wrote to her, and very definitive and clear what we wanted, what she needed to do to satisfy our needs.
Thanks.
Mike, I think while we're on buffers, I had written this down for either buffers or other business, but since we're on it, on May 29th, we got a phone call from Tim Stewart, who had driven by Leadham's farm and noticed a truck back in Leadham's dumping some debris. By the time he turned around and headed back, the truck had pulled out, so he was unable to stop the person or confront them. He expressed his concerns about this. So that morning, Dan and I drove over, witnessed exactly what he did. Tire tracks going in, some dumping going on. Fortunate for us, the tire tracks came out of there, and because they were muddy, went 2 houses down the street and into the driveway. So it was pretty clear what had happened. We drug the stuff out to the road so that when the individual drives by, he could see that we found it and pulled it out. We found a chain buried kind of under the driveway that looks like it's been driven over for years. So we pulled it up through the mud, and we rechained the 2 posts that are there. We put up a trail cam facing towards the farm, and we put up another ADT style camera facing towards the road. for obvious reasons. We don't want the trail cam going off every time a car goes by, but we would want video of a car pulling into that lot. We found an old sign, farmland preservation sign. So we were able to uncover that, set it, and we also put a no trespassing sign that video surveillance was underway. So that area has been completely addressed, cleaned up. Tim is aware, thanked us. I did let him know he'd have to take the chain down and put the chain back up for a little time, just while we're monitoring that area. But between the cameras, signs, chain, and us dragging that debris out to make it known that we found it pretty quickly, I think all is good. We didn't address the issue head on with the person. I had kids in the car. Wasn't going to go that route. I think it was pretty well known what we did. The person kind of watched us over there and watched us drive by their house pretty slowly. So I think they got the hint. So that one's taken care of. I did have to take the sign out of Stackhouse to put there immediately, but in the signs that I repurchased and rebuilt, made another one and replaced the sign over at Stackhouse. So that's done. Dennis, I have the 3 other signs for you and I to put in. You let me know whenever you want to go over and we'll go do that. They're sitting in the garage.
Okay.
The June 8th trees on Farmview, that we have that one. And then one other thing, just to bring to the attention, that flag post type property that was sold off of Bean Farm, which is, I think, 1561 Dolington, that has become quite active recently. George and I were talking about it before the call went on, but last week, the driveway was surveyed. Today, there's machines in there digging. The driveway's in the process of going in. I think that now that George has that farm, I think that somehow, some way, we should have George make contact with Jim Majewski, whether it's Mike introducing them, whatever. But there's going to be a driveway that rests pretty darn close to our property. Who knows how it's going to be pitched, but we're taking permeable ground to non-permeable ground. It's going to be a long stretch of macadam at some point, I'm sure. I think we just want to keep an eye on, I'm sure the line is correct because it was surveyed, but as we all know, that fence post is not the property line. We're going to get close. And because Stackhouse has had some water issues that we've paid for and dealt with, I think we just want to be kept in the loop as things are going on back there, so that we don't have a bigger water issue on our hands. So that's my only point there.
So Sean, my question then is, with the comment you just made that the fence line is not necessarily actually the property line, what do we as a group need to do with that to get that rectified?
I would believe that the fence on that side of the farm is probably going to come down, given, number one, it's decayed. Number two, it's not going to be what the new neighbors are going to want to stare at. And the work that's being done, the tree work, the driveway, all of that, I would have to believe that that's probably going to be removed. So that I'm not as worried about. The fact that a fresh survey is done, we know that the lines are going to be, kept intact, and the township is obviously going to have their eyes on it. My concern more is just that they know that we're a bit involved because we have the neighboring property that has had water issues in the past. We've rectified them. They're in good order. We don't want to see them go backwards after having spent that money.
I guess where I was going was, does that mean at some point we need to do something to our fence? A, if there's no fence there. B, if our fence is not really where it needs to be, do we need to relocate it?
So our fence is not the fence in question. The homeowner put the fence slightly outside of his property boundaries at some point. There is a fence there. Dan, you had this property prior to myself.
Yeah.
I don't know how it all went down, but there's actually a 6-foot deer fence that runs that property line. Granted, there's 1 or 2 holes in it, but there's a fence line that runs down there that does not look like our PennDOT fence.
Yeah, so our fence is pretty much entirely on our property. It is that the property line up towards the corner, the back corner of this new property, it's about, I don't know what guys, like 10 feet in. So our fence is not on their property. It doesn't need to be moved to ours. It's the opposite. So in theory, we could relocate our fence up to the property line. I think we wait and see. Or if you can get connected with the homeowner or by way of Jim, I mean, I don't think we need to worry about them encroaching on our property because, like Sean said, there's plenty of surveys that were done. There's plans that were approved by the township of how they're handling this, which, by the way, George, those plans include how they're handling the water runoff as well. Those all approved by the township. So I think it's just getting connected, like Sean said, at least with Jim. And to the extent we can get connected with the homeowner in some way, shape, or form, or the contractor, at least will be a good idea to know what their plan is for that property line so that we can do anything necessary from our side too.
I'll make the introduction for you, George, with Jim.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I was going to go over there and walk over there tomorrow anyway. I walked part of Stackhouse today when I was out for my walk because I heard all the equipment, but I didn't go around to the front off of Dolington, and I wanted to take a peek at what was happening anyway. So I'll probably do that tomorrow at some point.
Okay, good idea. Good idea.
It seems very healthy if the homeowner and or the contractor just are cognizant of and know, George,
We're watching.
that you're the neighboring property and you're
Yep.
kind of on site and present, and they, you know, they're kind of on alert that way. We've talked about there are recent surveys. Are there good survey stakes in the area? Are there good flag stakes so it is well marked?
Dennis, there
Okay.
are good flagged stakes
Okay,
in fresh stakes, fresh surveyor's tape,
Good.
fresh everything.
Okay,
Whether there's
good.
pins, anything like that, that's impossible to see unless
Yeah,
you got out and
yeah.
walked it, which I didn't do.
Right.
I have seen
Okay.
what I perceive to be the new homeowner there
Yeah.
quite a bit. Car parked on the side of the road, people taking pictures. They're local, they're from Yardley. So we're gonna see them often. I agree. It'd be very healthy if
Yeah.
they knew we were the neighboring, just, we're present.
Yeah.
That's all. But yeah, fresh. I will tell you that driveway is going to be, something coming out of. That is going to be a right only turn.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? I have one more buffer issue. That should have included these all in the agenda. That's the wildflower proposal on Heather Ridge. Dan, do you want to talk about that on Trowbridge?
Yeah, so homeowner at the back of Trowbridge that we've dealt with in the past, I wasn't going to bring this up until I had a resolution because there isn't a resolution yet.
Okay.
But I'll bring it up because I don't have the address in front of me. But basically, they were talking about putting wildflowers in the buffer, and specifically not the grass buffer, but in the trees, within the trees. So interestingly, the ordinance actually, the buffer ordinance actually discusses either grass or wildflowers in the actual grassy part of the buffer. But frankly, I think it's really just a matter of what Tom McGowan is comfortable with, and I haven't connected with Tom yet. So.
Okay. So I'll just note that as an action you're going to do.
And Mike, I have one other issue under the topic of buffers.
Please.
And Sean, you had made reference to the fact that as Matt has made such great progress in improving the buffers, mowing the buffers, he's now going to do more limb work, etc. And I don't know if this is more of a question maybe, but I think it's important that when we're talking about limb work, we're looking beyond the tidiness of the buffer or the ability to mow the buffer. And we're also including, and I think we are, but I do want to be sure, we're including the impact on the farm, on the crop. I'm looking at the video or the still picture behind Mike. When you have those shade trees like that on the edge of a field, you're not getting much of a yield there, right? It's blocking the sun. So any tree work we do, I want to be sensitive that we're also doing it on behalf of the farmer in trying to keep their field as productive as possible. I presume that that's in Matt's Bailey or in his thinking, Is that a fair assumption, Sean?
Dennis, I believe you're correct that it's in his line of thinking, because he even mentioned to Mike and I the other day when we were walking with him, like, hey, if we're out here, we should take care of this limb, because what farmer wants this hanging over?
Okay,
But
good.
I am going to remind him when I talk to him that before he does the limb work, think about tidiness, think about ease of trimming with your equipment, but also think about, the crop and the farmers as well. If you see something you think's a hindrance or dropping yield, that's something we should be looking at as well. So
Good.
I'll remind him of kind of our order of importance there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, excellent point. Good point, Dennis. Yeah. Okay, next topic. I don't know, Dan, I don't know that there's any more information to share on the Worthington easement request.
Yeah, there's no update from the last time we spoke.
Okay, we can just hold that over then. That's
Yeah,
fine.
it's with the township and the township solicitor to review some of the information and come back to us.
Okay. All right, then we can turn to Dennis and Sean for Makefield Brook. 3 topics. First, we'll take the no trespassing signs.
Well,
That's-
Sean, you
done.
just referenced that. You have 3 new ones to be
Yeah,
installed?
so it would just be an update. On the last call, we discussed kind of the non-permanence of our last set,
Yeah.
wooden posts, so on, not going to last very long. One big snowstorm, state truck goes down there, probably blows them out. We talked about a more permanent solution. With permission of the board, I ordered aluminum signs, reflective signs, went to Ace and bought good sturdy posts that we can drill and drive into the ground, and all the hardware. They're in my garage. They're ready, Dennis. Because you and I did the originals, I'd love to go back and do these with you. Let's plant these right in the ground, good and solid. I did notice that I believe the township, because I can't imagine who else would do it, but just on the other side of the fence, Dennis, where you and I stood and said, here's our issue, here's their issue, a new sign just went in that said no dumping, $300 fine.
Oh,
So they've now placed
Oh.
a sign there in that little pull off where the issue takes place on their side. Now you and I will just continue by pulling out our old signs, putting in new ones that will kind of
Good.
weather the storm a little better and be a little bit more professional and permanent. I guess the only question is, once we're done with the trail cam over on Leadham's, do we take the trail cam and put it there from time to time? We know there's traffic back there, couldn't hurt. But
Yeah.
we know that the police have been alerted to that area as well, LMT police. So, perhaps activity will go down in there now that school is out, and we know kids like to get together.
right.
And who in the township did you inform that we got such a great quick response to put up the no dumping? Was that through Jim or Greg?
I mean, I had spoken to the police chief about the issue that we had, with the kids partying and things. And, and I think Jim Majewski was aware as well in those conversations with, that area. How and why or who they
But between the
decided
two,
to do that, it's great. Yeah, all good.
Right.
The other issue in that area was the open well pipe. I sent an email to the board here this past week. We had hired Barnard Murphy Plumbing to cap that well. They have been used by the township before. The township recommended them. I've used them just personally at my home before, and I have a lot of confidence in them. So I contacted Barry Murphy, and he agreed, and he went out and looked at it. He ordered the right size cap. He installed it here within this past week and sent me a wonderful note saying he just wanted to make that contribution. So good for Barnard Murphy. They're great citizens. Farmland really appreciates that support. So anything we can do for them in terms of recommendations, I'm all in favor of. So that's been taken care of, and it didn't cost us a dime.
Right. Good news. Love that
Very
good
nice.
news. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
The other issue at Makefield Brook is the fence that the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge Commission never replaced along 295 and our property. I had just corrected that in the minutes. That was handled by Jim Majewski. He's contacted them and he hasn't heard anything back yet. He'll continue to, poke at that, but I expect pretty slow reactions.
Yeah, and they're already pulling, there's signs they're pulling out of the Torbert, what I call the parking lot over there. So they're closing up shop, it looks like, yeah. Okay, so we'll stay on top of that. And we can turn to, still with you, Dennis, the open utility box on Clearview. Anything new on that?
Greg Hucklebridge was handling that. As I think he has resigned to accept another position. He has turned that over to Wayne Bechtel, I believe it is, in the Public Works Department. Wayne just called me here today to give me an update. They have reached the American Tower Company, who is responsible for that. American Tower is going to needs to send someone out to investigate exactly what is in that utility box. It could be something that belongs to a cable company, in which case the cable company would be responsible for it. It could be electrical utilities, in which case PICO is. So they have to determine exactly the utility of that box, and then they will reach out to the appropriate organization to rebuild or repair that. So that's the latest. The township is on it, and I appreciate Wayne's follow-up.
How does Wayne spell his last name? Any idea?
It's Bechtel. 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 And I have his email if you need it.
Any other thoughts, questions for Sean or Dennis on Makefield Brook? Great follow-up. Thank you both. Okay, or Clearview. So
Clearview, right.
Yeah, anything on Clearview. Okay, so we'll go to a topic that I have on FarmView 2. As you know, during the spring tour, it became clear that Dennis and others were out there and saw that there was a need for some more fencing. And plus we had a very messy buffer situation. So Sean has updated us on the Corcoran efforts to clean that buffer, which they seem to have done a great job. And I just heard today, we chose PCS Pickering Courts in Somerson as the surveyor for that property because they had done it in the past and they gave us the best price. I just heard today from the homeowner on Susan Circle that PCS had just finished with their survey because she saw stakes in the ground. And I suppose that some of it might have been a surprise, but I don't know, I haven't seen it yet. So she said, before you do anything, of course, you'll keep us involved, to which I texted her back, of course we will, we won't do anything. I said, first we have to discuss it as a board. We have to decide where fencing would go if we do put up fencing, and that we would involve them, of course, in any outcome. So the survey's done. Yeah, and Don Reif, the surveyor, had offered. I asked him that I wanted at least to walk the line with him to get an idea. And when I hear, I'll let other members know if anybody's available to do that too, because I think that'll help us make a decision on where fence we feel should go. Now we did get 3 quotes on fencing for all 3 companies: Hilltop, Apex, and Bob White. we had walked the entire property. I had them give a quote as if they were doing the entire property, minus the area that's already done behind Sunnyside Lane. There's a short segment of fence there. They gave their estimates. I put it on Microsoft Teams. When I put they were within 20 linear feet of each other, very close. They used their wheels to, of course, to measure. When I took their total prices, which range from 18,000 something to 22,000, and divided by their measurement, I came up with a per linear foot cost for each, and Apex was actually the lowest. I put it on Microsoft Teams. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think it was 11.95 maybe for
Apex came in the mid
10, yeah,
10, 11,
yeah,
and then 13.50.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, John. So I don't know if you'd like to make a decision on the fence company that we use, or you'd rather wait until we make a decision on the fencing and where it goes and then make the decision. It's either way is fine by me. Any discussion on that? Because I will say that once we make a decision on where the fence goes, I'd like to go out with one fence company, not with all three again, right?
Right. Yeah,
Mike,
I think
go ahead,
once
Dennis.
we understand, I'm sorry, Sean.
No,
Go
go ahead. Keep
ahead.
going.
I was going to say, I think once we understand what the fencing plan would be, it could change these estimates, of course, and maybe it would change, which one is preferred. If there's a span with just posts and whatever the scenario is, my sense would be that we decide what the fencing plan is and then choose. And it could be that that plan is something that can just be described to them in an email and let each one revise their estimate, given that plan. I'd be surprised if it needs, a revisit. If we said there's 50 feet of no fence or whatever the plan is, my sense would be to, let them bid on the final before we decide. That would be my thought.
And to your
I'd be-
point, it'd be
Yeah, go ahead,
easy
Mike.
enough, Sean, if you just a moment, it would be easy enough to do that by email or calls, because they, at least two of them, mapped out
Yeah,
the line, and we could just say, put it in here, and we could email back and forth about it.
right,
Yep.
right.
Okay,
Okay,
Sean?
Yeah, I would agree with Dennis in that I'd rather wait to see what the project scope is before deciding on anyone. Number one, because there's a large likelihood we'll be re-engaging someone we've already worked with in the past. So that'll be a simple task. But two, I think we have a couple decisions to make around where fence goes versus where posts go, specifically because of how unique that one line is. And we don't want to create ourselves more problems, meaning putting our fence very tight to a newly established vinyl fence, which will create a void where they can't cut and we can't cut, and then we have an overgrowth problem. If we can get away with posts for part of that line, like we do over at Heather Ridge, for instance, it'll be a cost benefit, up front and in the future for having to keep it. Plus in the back, I think there's a few areas where we can do similar. So let's figure out what the scope is first, and then, and then decide where we're going.
And I to add to that, I think it would be very helpful to have as many board members as possible join me and the surveyor and walk that, because that just being out there, I think, will tell us a lot more about what is possible, what we want to do.
Agreed.
And some of the fencing people did suggest that in addition to those green metal stakes, posts, that we put up some type of a more visible, perhaps PVC pipe. Doesn't have to be very large diameter, but something to mark it in a better fashion, that clearly maybe we can even mark on there farmland preservation property or the like. I mean, even those green things can be pulled out, right? We've seen them pulled out in the past. I know Dan, right? We've seen them
Yeah.
on Stackhouse pulled out. So whatever we can do to really, finally mark those lines for everybody to see would help. Okay, so I'll let everyone know when when Don Reif is available, and get some dates from him and from the rest of us. Just write that down. Garden survey.
And I don't know the exact spacing, but what I've seen work really well in a farm field that lasts forever and nobody takes it out. In a case like that where there's no fence, is rather than those green iron vent posts, the round galvanized corner posts with that little cap on them.
Yeah.
You set a couple of those along and you set them in concrete.
They're not
They
coming out.
last forever. They're visible, but they're not intrusive. It's not, offensive to the eye. It's galvanized metal. And if they're, they don't have to be as close as those green posts, but I have used that on my farm in a couple places where we kind of had a neighbor issue, and never been another question. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Dennis, you know how these posts are almost U-shaped on the inside?
Yeah.
Another thing that I've seen done and is very effective is buying pieces of rebar, cutting them at say 2-3 feet, spray painting the tops fluorescent orange, and driving them down in that U itself.
Inside the U. Yeah.
Yep. You can't get to them. You can't yank them out. They're fluorescent orange on top. They're visible. And it's a cheaper way of doing, something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Both.
there's different approaches. We want to do something that's appropriate to mark the line and also sensitive to our neighbors there. I mean, we don't want to do anything that someone's going to find offensive.
That's
Or intrusive.
Good points. Okay, so we'll turn to Longshore, where there were vines growing on our fence. As I've said before, Dan, John Lewis, and I were out and burned and hacked and took vines, but they came right back. And as Matt, who I spoke to the other day about this, because there were still, he went out and did a nice job on the portion of the fence that had vines that's visible to the homeowner. The first house at Pownell and Dolington did a great job. But I drove by the other day. There were still vines, and the homeowner was very happy with what Matt had done. I thought, well, we're done, but there were still vines there. She couldn't see them because they were hidden by her shrubs, evergreen shrubs, and their shed. And I said, will you please help us clean that up? And she said, she went out and looked at it. She says, well, she saw that the trunks of the vines are on our side for the most part. So Matt said he'd go out sometime this week, and perhaps the solution that he thought of would be to pull them out, maybe with a tractor and chains, and just rip them out. He said, and then the leaves above will just die off. So that's where we've left it. And the homeowner is happy with that plan, but it hasn't been affected yet. So he said he could take a look at that and do that. Hope that's okay with you, Sean. I just called him up, and he's going to do that.
Absolutely. Everybody should have access to him. I'm happy to be a liaison, but everybody has access to him. He's very good at texting. One thing we should note, Mike, is just the neighbor's request that we please take a look next June on our side of the fence. I believe she stated her daughter was getting married in the yard.
Yes.
So, the least we can do is just make a trip back there early June next year and just make sure our side is taken care of.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's the vines. And then there's another issue on both Longshore and Leadham, where our fence has been cut. I'll just start with Longshore, Sean. The one homeowner there, we wrote a letter. We wrote a letter to 3 of the 4 properties where this happened. So one homeowner got back to me in my email and her claim was that she actually tried to put the gap, as she called it, together with bungee cords and wrapping with wire, and that she claimed that, well, she did, by omission, she didn't know. She claimed that she didn't do it, but I tried to get back to her to learn more. I haven't been able to. But anyway, so there's that one property there. There's there's three on Leadham, I think, Sean, right? Two, and we sent
Three on
letters to
Leadham's. Yeah, only two we've been able to address because the third one, I literally have to jump the fence and take a 25-minute walk to get to. And I will do it, just time constraints. But the two that we did send letters to, similar story. Neither cut the fence. They moved into homes with a cut fence already. And either because they had access or because maybe the prior homeowner had cut back there, they both admitted to tending to that yard, cutting it with their own lawnmowers. I believe they both said they'd stop if that was the request. They didn't mean harm by it. Just, it grows high. This is where insects, ticks, and so on find their way to, and they just wanted to make it nicer. I would like to say that now that the buffer looks the way it does, they literally have no reason to go back there and continue to cut. And let's hope that remains the same. But I liked the fact that both replied back rather quickly and somewhat apologetically and wanted us to know they did not cut the fences. They moved into homes with cut fences. So, if we were ever doing fence work and wanted to replace those fences or fix them, I'm sure we wouldn't get any pushback on doing it because they didn't cut the fences. I worry more about the breachability, whether it be from animals or humans, when we have cuts in the fence. But nonetheless, the letter was effective.
So, Sean, once you get the time to get out there and get me the address of the other kind of fence, I'll send that final letter. Once we have all four identified, well, I think by that time, probably the fence company that we decided on, we can take them out as they're doing Farm View 2 and say, hey, we got these others. Could you fit those in too? And maybe we'll just get them thrown in if we play our cards right.
Sure. Yep. I will get you that address this week.
Great. So there was one thing I forgot to say is that the homeowner on Longshore, sort of as an addition to what she said about trying to close that gap herself, is that she said, oh, by the way, I noticed there was deer hunting on that farm field and no one informed us about that. And I let her know that Pennsylvania law protects the homeowners, neighbors, by the 50-yard rule. I have that right? 50 yards?
Archery with a bow and arrow,
50 yards, yes.
Yeah. So, and I haven't heard back from her. Her neighbor, who I happened to talk to, said she's had COVID, so I didn't expect to hear from her soon. What do you think about that? About sending out general letters to? I don't think we've ever done that before.
About that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would be very productive. I think most residents don't care. Many
support
that I've run into applaud the fact that maybe the deer population is being addressed, and then I know some are appalled by it. So it's such a wide-ranging reaction. A generalized letter could just kind of kick a dog that we don't want to kick. That would
I agree, Dennis. It would be a very generalized letter with very little detail because each farm is hunting differently.
But I mean, there's only a couple places where hunters go, and even though it's they're hunting Leadham, there's only a couple stands, and you're notifying everyone. You could just cause excitement that's not necessary. That's just my first reaction. I mean, generally speaking, we haven't had a lot of reaction to it, I would say. And just as a point of order, we have it is a hard stop at 7. And we have other business and public comment. I just want to be
thank you,
not to cut off the topic, but
I confirm with the moderator that we actually have until 7:15.
Oh, okay. Well, you know
Because
more than I did. Okay.
the next committee,
I thought it
the
was
next,
7.
next committee meets at 7:30, so I am keeping
Okay.
an eye on the clock, but thank you. Thank
No,
you.
no, okay. That's good.
Mike, just to round that out, I'd vote to take any questions or comments on that as they come in. I
Yeah.
think that people would rest assured knowing that we know it's being legally done. We have a roster of hunters,
Right.
vetted hunters, and so on. So I think we'd rather take those on as they come in.
We
Oh,
also, I mean, also you
Yeah,
can
so-
rest assured, I think we follow the same protocol that the township follows, right? Which is that they're not sending out notifications, but they're discussing it at public meetings from a township perspective too. Like the BOMA side, right, is all discussed and approved from a township supervisor perspective. We're doing the same thing the township is doing.
Good point. Good point, everybody. I brought it up just for discussion, not as a proponent of doing it. So thanks.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
a fair topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I had written down a few items under other business, which we covered. I'll ask if anyone else has any other business to discuss.
I have one very quick, Mike. Dan, it looked like you were going to speak if you have something important, fire.
Community Day, well, August meeting and Community Day. And because I think we have a set meeting in July now.
Ah, yes.
Historically, we've canceled an August meeting.
Correct.
And I don't know if we've officially come to a conclusion if we're doing anything on Community Day or not. I think we've passed on it, just want to be sure.
My understanding is we haven't come to a conclusion yet. That was my.
Well, I think
understanding.
the last time you asked Dennis for volunteers for someone to man the Sternad, Dr. Sternad proposed to put something together if you could find a board member who was willing to
Right.
be trained and do something there. So far, I don't think anybody has volunteered.
And just a reminder, that's August 28th, is that right? No,
27 is my recollection, but let me just find it here. August
Well, it is
27,
yeah,
Saturday, 27.
the 27th.
Right.
Okay.
And then our next meeting, July.
So,
On
sorry,
that topic,
just to conclude that. So,
wait,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
may be able
go ahead.
to, I believe I can commit to Community Day on the 27th. I've been trying to clarify my August calendar.
Good.
So I'm about 75% certain I can be there on the 27th. I'll firm that up here shortly. But if we have someone, then our beekeeper we could ask our beekeeper what resources he would make available for that day to talk about, to use the honey hives as a topic of discussion around farmland. So
Yeah, good. And now that
I'd
we
like to
know that,
keep that open.
well, and now that we know that you're able to do it, maybe some of us could spell you or support you and come out for a couple hours or so during the day.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd welcome that.
I'm sure I would.
Okay, I'll certainly try.
Okay.
Mike, one thing for other business, but given the time today, maybe we can discuss it at a later meeting, but let's just kind of tab it for now.
Okay.
I was contacted by a neighbor on Stackhouse Farm, Leadham's Road, Stackhouse Farm. You had sent the email, but someone that was inquiring about what was going on the farm on the day that they came out and actually planted the crop. Because of the way the machine looks, it looked like they might have been spraying. She just had questions. I wouldn't say concerns, but questions like, hey, can you let us know what was going on the farm? Was anything sprayed? Should we be hanging out inside on days that happens? So on. I reached out to her. We had a good dialogue for a couple of days about who it was, what they were doing, what they weren't doing, so on. Sent them the standard note that we have about spraying. And at the end, her request was, listen, we've lived here for 25 years. It would be amazing if you all could ever kind of inform us, the neighbors that live on the farms, of a loose plan. This is when things would go on, obviously could be dictated by weather, so on. She said, you know, for instance, I don't hang out on the days outside when they do spray. I don't know if it's water. I don't know what it is, but we don't hang out outside on those days. That's just her, she said. But putting together like a loose timeline of if the weather cooperates, this is what would be going on. I don't know if it's something we want to get into or not, just like we discussed the deer, but let's earmark it and discuss it. If it's something we'd ever want to share, how we'd want to share it, if it's worth doing so. But I guess, you know, some of the people who live on the farm are curious about what goes on back there behind the fence. And I guess I'd like to take the temperature of the board as to what we feel we can share, want to share, don't want to, you know, whatever it may be. That's all.
Yeah, it's a good thought, because around the properties, on our properties, there's only two things that are planted. It's either corn or soybeans. It's not sweet corn, it's not pumpkin, etc. It ought to be reasonably simple to generalize what the typical season would look like. You know,
I agree.
Saying, you know, depending upon temperatures and weather. That doesn't seem too complicated to me.
I think we could put together with Tim and Sam an easy timeline. I mean, the line truck that goes out, people don't know what's coming out of that truck. When they're out there spraying water, maybe people think it's pesticides or chemicals. Some people's minds go to the worst thing, but I think we can calm some of the fears and maybe give them a brief timeline and let them know that the crop rotates. The average person does not know the crop rotates around from soy to corn.
And what the rotation is.
You know, it's field corn, it's not sweet corn. It's got to get good and hard and dry before it can be harvested. And you know, and just some,
if we could get it down to
101 kind of stuff.
If we could get it down to a really tiny paragraph, we can include it in that letter every 2 years that we want to send out.
There you go. There you go. It was a request. That was all.
Yeah. No, it's a good thought. Good thought. So I wanted to come back to the other business we didn't get to. Dan had a good point to stay with what we were talking about. And that's our next board meeting. So that's Tuesday, July 19th. Zoom as usual at this same time, 6. And no meeting in August unless without objection, right? We'll start up again. Okay. Start up again in September. And any other business.
So are we now fixed for the third Tuesday at 6 p.m. via Zoom for the rest of the year?
Correct.
Okay.
We are.
Correct. Even though those meeting calendar events haven't come out yet, that's it. Yeah.
That's what we should count on.
Third Tuesday at 6.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
And if something comes up, as Katie McMahon has promised me, that she would be amenable to searching for an alternate time. Okay, why don't we go right to, public comment first. So I'll ask the moderator if there's been any public.
There's been no public comment.
Thank you. And then we can go on to action items. So I think this should be George again.
Yeah, it should be.
Okay, George.
I
will change that.
So what I have is some follow-ups here. Is Sean and Dennis are going to put up those new signs once Sean and Dennis can agree on a time that they need to, and replace the old, I'll call them temporary signs. Mike, you're going to help get connected with Jim Majewski at Lower Makefield Township. And that way I can start to follow up with him regarding the new house being built over there off of Stackhouse. Dan is going to follow up on the wildflower. I guess that's Heather Ridge. You kept saying Trowbridge. Okay. Then, Mike, you're gonna follow up with the surveyor to find out when he might be available to walk the property lines, and then you'll let any board members know when that is, and we'll try to get as many of us to walk that together as possible. Sean, you were gonna get, I guess, the 4th address off, I guess it's off Leadham's for that fence repair issue. To
Yeah,
Mike.
off Darlington. I'll get it.
Off Darlington. And then, Dennis, I guess I kind of have you, even though you're 75% sure, you need to 100%
right.
confirm that you're going to be available for Community Day on the 27th, and then figure out if anybody else is available to do that. So that's what I have.
Good, thank you.
That's all I had too. Good job. Yep. On August 27th. Okay, so any parting thoughts or comments?
I want to thank our chairman for a very productive meeting.
Second that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. 7:01, not bad. Okay.
Not bad at all.
All right, well, have a very pleasant rest of the evening. See
I make the
you.
motion, we adjourn.
Oh,
Seconded.
second it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, done.
Take care.
Bye now.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.